with the Project Advantage podcast. Today we have a special guest to talk to us about the trades from a very different vantage point than we've typically been used to. Today I have with us Kate, who's Executive Director of Explore the Trades. And at Explore the Trades, they focus on providing resources about careers in the trades of plumbing, heating, cooling, and electrical to educators, students, and parents across the country. Kate, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Cory, for having me. I appreciate it.
So I gave a little intro to our audience about what the organization does, but maybe in your own words to start out.
Yeah, absolutely. So like you said, Explore the Trades is a nonprofit. And our goal is to bridge that technical talent gap to the trades of electrical, HVAC, and plumbing. And a lot of the work that we do, I like to say we start at square one with educating and making students and teachers and their parents aware of all of the career opportunities that exist in those three trades. And a lot of the information we put out is applicable and can be used in classrooms from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade. So we have a wide variety of information so that students can learn about what plumbers and HVAC techs and electricians do every day.
So what sort of information do we give to kindergarteners when we're talking to them about going into the trades?
That's a great question. So our team back in January created a series of 3 posters that are all illustrated and they're a cutaway of a home so that early readers, elementary students can learn about the different components that you might have in your home, whether it's the water heater, whether it's learning how the water comes out of the faucet, and with language that talks about those different pieces of equipment in your home. So, and there's also technicians in every home so that they can see, people who look like them working on these systems.
And in our show notes, we'll post a link to one of the kindergarten versions of the poster. And if I recall correctly, you also have these versions for other levels within the schools as well.
Yeah, we do. So the poster kit program that we have has been in existence since 2021. And to your point, Cory, we have these new ones for elementary students. We also have 2 other collections that are career paths. So middle school students, high school students, their parents, their teachers can see at a glance what that career progression might look like if I choose one of those 3 trades. So what we wanted to do is outline those major milestones in these careers, whether it's from education in your apprenticeship all the way to business ownership. We just wanted to provide everyone with a glance of all of these different, like I said, career milestones outside of being a technician that exist within the trade. And we also wanted to also dispel at the same time that stigma or any stigmas that might be associated with the trades of, well, the old school thinking of, well, you have your toolbox and that's it, which we know, and everybody listening knows that that's not the case. So we wanted to shine a light on that. So within those collections, we have one version in English and one in Spanish.
That's great. And it's definitely not as simple as just a toolbox.
No, yeah, absolutely.
Anyone who's in the trades knows that, but that is the historical thought. Someone walks in with the toolbox, they can fix anything.
Yep, that's right.
There's more than just the toolbox now.
Yes.
The programs really started to address an issue in the space. So at LED Lighting Supply, we're a supplier, so we see it and hear about the problem in the trades of there's not enough contractors, there's not enough plumbers, there's not enough people working in HVAC. We talk to end users. They want to work on projects, but they can't get booked until months and months out because their electrician doesn't have capacity. And then on the other side, we'll talk to a contractor who says, I want to do this project. I'm ready to do it. The customer's ready to do it, but I can't find enough help. And it's really a big problem in today's world.
Yeah. And I would imagine you hear that all the time. I mean, you have to. I mean, it's even talking with our neighbors down the street, they're looking to do a project at home, and then the realization of, oh my gosh, I can't get someone for another 4 weeks. And you and I, we're having those conversations all the time, so that's not a surprise. I think that when you peel the layers back, and I think everyone wonders, how did we get here? And I think that for us at Explore the Trades being so closely tied to schools, you look at what happened, 40 years ago, where in the 70s and 80s, everyone started to go to college, and that sort of started this college for everybody mentality, which we know is not the case, and not everyone is suited for that. But I think that started over a generation ago, and now we find ourselves with a skilled shortage of people, and now we're playing catch up. And I was reading, I forgot what publication it was, but it was an op-ed piece about the labor shortage, and they're saying that the millennials are sort of considered that lost generation to the trades, because not a lot of people had access to shop class and auto body and all of those classes in school where you would get a dose of that, you would get a taste of what that was like. So it's just, I think that's just another compounding factor as to where we are.
So I guess for full disclosure, I am that lost generation. And so I remember
yourself, so that's good.
I remember when I was in, I believe it was 5th or 6th grade, they were just at the tail end of regularly scheduled shop class, basic electrical work. And we had so they had gotten to the point where it was off of the regular curriculum, but once a semester you went in and did carpentry work. And so I remember being in this big shop that was still at the school. And now I have to imagine it's unfortunately not there anymore. We never really, we messed around in there. We didn't really learn anything though. And so, as you said, then it was time to go to college, apply to college, or get a job, but it wasn't going to be one of those jobs because we didn't learn enough about it.
Right. I love that you remember it. I remember, so I'm on the cusp. I'm on the very, very tail end of Gen X. And I remember middle school, we had a shop class, and every other day you would go and we built we did drafting, and we built those CO2 cars. I don't know if anyone else listening ever made those, but we made those. And moving into high school, we had a shop room in the high school, and it was auto body. I grew up in a rural community in North Iowa, so some of it was also, people would bring in their tractors and and work on small engine repair, things like that. And I know that doesn't exist anymore where I went to high school. And I think one of the reasons why is that the teacher who had taught that class for so long retired. So I think that's another thing where if schools did have shop class, most of the time it was a long tenured teacher who taught that class. And by the time they retired, they couldn't find someone to fill that spot. So they just axed it from the curriculum. And, then that frees up budget money, and that's a whole other conversation. But I think there's all these little things here and there that just sort of phased it out.
And as you say that, I now remember that the person who gave us that one-day class, they retired at the end of that semester, at the end of that year, and it was exactly that. So this is part of what your organization is trying to solve, is how do we get the information back in there? How do we get pros back in there to even help the next generation to learn about it?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the ways, and like I said, with these posters, that's been the most impactful. So right now we have our posters in we just did the math the other day, 16.8% of public school districts in the country, which is about 2,200, 2,300 different school districts. So keep in mind, there's, 13,000 and change out there. So slowly but surely, we're making our mark. And we've heard from school counselors, from teachers, that the posters are a really good talking point, because as we're realizing, not a lot of those professionals have the background or the knowledge to appropriately talk about the trades and how to get into them. So not a lot of knowledge about apprenticeships. Where would I go to start? Everybody knows how to get into college, but no one knows how to get started in the trades. And so these have been a really valuable touch point to that conversation. And the more we've learned is that there are a number of schools who want to expose the students to a trade of some sort. A couple constraints is that we want to, but maybe we don't have all the budget funding needed. Or most commonly is we would love to, but we can't find an instructor. And I think that's sort of the unicorn piece that's missing.
And so, what does the ideal instructor look like to come in? The school's looking for someone, or maybe even there's someone out there in the community who's trying to push for it to happen. But what's that profile look like that you've seen to be successful?
Yeah, we've had the chance to meet some instructors in person. And the first person that comes to mind is a gentleman I met in Lubbock, Texas. So he teaches in the Lubbock school system. And he himself is a master plumber. So he still has his license. He had the opportunity to work a number of years in his career and was just ready for a switch. And so he found the perfect balance between family life and being able to pass on the trade to students in that community. And I think thinking of him, it's the schools who benefit most are those who have had the experience themselves, who are licensed and find themselves with such a passion to give back that the school is the right way to do that. So I think the more that the professionals in the trade can realize, like, even if you're coming to the tail end of your career in the field, that's not the end of your career passing on the knowledge and the skills that you've learned. There's so much more opportunity in your community. I think it's how can we help identify those potential instructors and getting them connected with those schools.
And just to clarify for anyone in the trades listening, maybe is that profile you're talking about towards the end of their career? Are we talking volunteer positions, or are we talking a paid position in the school? What do you typically see?
Yeah, that's a great question. From what we've seen has always been a paid position. I think, depending on what the local school is looking for and what the best fit is for that community, it could be a volunteer position. I think it just depends case to case.
Gotcha. Makes sense. So we talked about this is a problem for businesses. How can, even if I'm not looking to transition to retirement, I have an electrician small firm, I have a big plumbing firm. How do we get involved to really help nurture that next generation without walking into the school? Like, what options have you seen out there to help in the community?
I think for all of those businesses in the trade, thinking of other schools that we have connected with, a lot of times those success stories are coming from those small businesses, large businesses, whoever's in town, knowing that they need people, everyone needs people. And there's a lot of opportunity, a lot of benefit that comes from that early exposure. So knowing that if the school has a career day, if they're open to field trips, or if they're open for guest speakers, I think that's the easiest opportunity for someone to get in front of those students. So knowing that it's a good marketing opportunity for your company because you bring in the swag and the kids are going to take it home to their families. I think there's a lot of community benefit there. I also think that, obviously you remember when you had your carpentry day at school. I think a lot of those a lot of those things really stick with students. So we've talked with contractors who say, yep, I go to the school every fall, every spring. We have a spot in the gym where we can bring in a toilet and the students can look at a toilet. They can take it apart. Bringing in those pieces of equipment to take apart. And then that's the time for the students to touch it, understand how it works. So right there, you have the opportunity to talk about any chemistry or algebra, subjects that they might be talking about. I think that's the easiest way to get a foot in the door, is to bring what you have.
You mentioned the bringing the toilet, and it makes me think of the I'm not sure if it was a story or a saying that had you become a plumber when you turned 18 instead of going to college, by the time I don't know the exact age. If we can find the visual, put it up on
Yes.
the podcast on the screen for everyone to see. But basically, that you outperform
Yes.
uh, most college-based professions. I mean,
Yes.
look at a doctor where you're taking out $500,000 in loans potentially in 12 years of school versus I can jump into a career, become an apprentice, work with a good team who really knows what they're doing and work my way up. And I'm making a real living pretty quickly.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about, Cory. And every time I see that in the various platforms, that's a good math problem. That's a good math
Yeah,
problem to
it
have.
really is. It
Yeah.
really is. And I think too about, even beyond the high school level, I went to college and I remember my freshman year of college, multiple people, potentially myself at one point or another, wondering, was this the right path to be going down? And I think in the United States, we've seen such a push towards you go to high school, you go to college, and that's the only option. Whereas the truth is, yes, you should be a productive member of society, but going to college to get there isn't the only way. And someone who maybe went through their first year of college thinking that was the way, it would be great for there to be a smoother avenue for them to say, you know what, I tried this out. It wasn't what I thought it was going to be, or it's not for me. I want to try a different path. And I think the trades are a phenomenal the other path for them to try.
Oh, absolutely. And to your point about college, I went to college. I obviously a lot of people in our age group did, and it's not that the conversation is either or. I mean, in terms of, well, you shouldn't go to college and that's it, or you should go into the trades and not consider anything else. I don't think it has to be an either or conversation. To your point, I think it's how do we how do we frame it so that everyone who's ready to graduate high school, which I guess looking at the calendar, I think a lot of people already have already this spring. But there's a lot of pros and cons. And if it doesn't work out, taking whatever skills that you learned in college during the time you were there can easily be applicable to a new career path, which we hope is in the trades. So yeah, I don't think it has to be an exclusive either or decision. I think for a lot of people, it can be both.
So for a company, as I'm thinking about recruiting, I know I brought up about, we hear from contractors being constrained, uh, trying to navigate, kindergarten through fourth grade or fifth grade is great for a long-term strategy. I want to ensure that the career continues, but for those more near term where, I have needs in the next 6 to 12 months or even today, um, how can a program like this, I guess help me in my business while I also help give back to the schools and the community?
Yeah, and obviously we know that working with elementary students, that's a really long-term strategy. But
Got to invest early and often.
That's right, that's
Early and
right.
often.
One thing that we've seen and in some of our conversations is the fact that so early, a few minutes ago I alluded to schools having budget constraints and it's like that with every community around the country. And what's fascinating to me is we have at a federal level, there's funding reserved for career and tech ed programs at schools around the country, and every year those funds are distributed to every state, and every state can then distribute those funds to the school districts around their region to use as they see fit for career and tech ed. So schools have this funding, and I think what would be a benefit most is certainly you can't stretch. I mean, you could, but it's hard to adequately fund every career and tech ed program that you would want to. So to your question, if I'm a local business and I know that I need people, I think it's worth a conversation with that local school to say, first of all, if they have an electrical program that they are introducing to their students, So knowing that there's funding there, how can I as a business complement what's happening? So if I have an electrical business, I know that I have supplies that I could donate. I know that I have shop space that I can invite the school to utilize. I know that I can, if time allows, maybe be a part-time instructor with that class. I think I think it's goodwill for both sides. I think it's goodwill for the company, and you are showcasing your company, what you do to potential employees. And I think it behooves small businesses and other companies greatly to get there. And so you're having interviews with these students. You know who has maybe the character who would be a great fit for your company. You know who's, showcasing work ethic, showing up on time, all of these intangible skills that you can't necessarily train, but they just have, right? And I think that that's a great eye on the prize for businesses. At the same time, for those students, they get to see what's being used and taught in the workplace right now. And because, a lot of times we've heard from other companies say, we had new hires come and we had to retrain them because what they learned in school is not what we're doing now. So the advantage for those students is, yep, this is a tool that we use, or this is the process that we use right now. And so I think there's a lot of pros either way.
And for students going into any career or any next step of their life, showing up on time always pays off and is top of the list of important things to make sure you do.
I know. We tell our kids that all the time. Like, showing up on time a few minutes early, that's it. That's half the battle, right? You already have a foot in the door with that. So it's that easy stuff. Yeah.
Absolutely. Uh, no, this is all great stuff. So, in terms of your organization, pain points that you're seeing in terms of working this transition, what's the biggest thing, do you think, holding back this from taking a sort of a stronger footing? Is it the funding? Is it the instructors not having enough people from the trades to come in? What's the biggest pain point?
I think related to pain points, I think schools are on that precipice of expanding trades programs, but they don't know who to talk to. They don't know who to reach out to. And then conversely, businesses, I think business owners are starting to see that you can't just, put an ad in the paper and you find someone. I think the envelope is being pushed to go younger and younger with that long-term strategy. So I think the pain point is just knowing who to talk to first and foremost. And I think a lot of it is understanding how they can be involved in the community with that piece, and alleviating some financial constraints. I think, and then
It's really all of us. There's so
it's,
many things that
it's all of us, yeah. And I think the more that we research it, looking at it from an education side, from the school side, and then seeing it from the business side, I think everyone is starting to speak the same language. It's just the realization now that we've been using two sets of vocabulary. You know what I mean? It's, education is talking this way and business is talking this way. And slowly but surely we're starting to meet in the middle to know that the goals are all the same. It's just figuring out how to communicate those.
I think one of the really fascinating things going on in the world right now is on the AI side and the data center side. There's so much growth, so much development. There's so much, what, at least from my vantage point, it looks like there's a lot of money and time and effort going into STEM programs in schools, which has helped fuel that AI data center growth. Recently, there was a report that came out saying something you and I already know, which is there's not enough electricians
Right.
to build all of these data centers.
Right. Exactly.
And so both, they really feed off of each other, and the growth of some of these professional coding careers and careers down that path, they actually help fuel demand for trade careers in many ways.
Right,
And
right. It's
cool.
interesting. Yeah, and to your point, well, we're all after the same thing, right? Like it's chicken or the egg, or I think it's how do we get there? What's the one path to get everybody moving in the same direction? You know?
Well, this has been great, Kate. I appreciate you joining us today. How can companies interested in learning more or getting involved find out more about you and explore the trades?
Yeah, absolutely. So our website is explorethetrades.org, and our handle on all of the social platforms is at Explore the Trades. So certainly we invite you to stop by the website, take a look around, follow us on social. And obviously with us being a nonprofit, we're always looking for partners to help us propel the work that we do forward, whether because all of I referenced the posters earlier in the episode, and a gift of $10 helps us get us set out to a school. So we're really excited about that. And we've been able to reach over 800,000 students with these posters. So we're closing in
Wow.
on a million, which is really exciting.
Fantastic. Well, can't wait for you to get to the million, and hopefully our listeners learned a lot about the program, and you'll be hearing from them soon. So
Awesome.
thank you again, Kate, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks so much.